She arrived at the music academy every morning, just as the sun began to rise, the sky painted in soft shades of pink and gold. While most people thought of the academy as a place filled with students chasing fame and glory, for her it was a place of quiet routine, a place where she could belong without being noticed. She pushed open the heavy doors, carrying her cleaning supplies, a mop, a bucket, and a small bag that held a few personal belongings. Her uniform was simple, slightly worn at the edges, but always neat. She liked it that way. It reminded her that she had a place here, even if it wasn't in the spotlight. She moved silently through the halls, careful not to disturb the early morning classes. The corridors were lined with tall windows, and the light spilling in made the dust in the air sparkle like tiny stars. She took a moment sometimes just to look out the windows, watching the city wake up slowly. People rushed by, their lives moving fast, but she liked the quiet mornings, a sense of calm before the world became busy. She had learned to find peace in small moments, and this was one of them. Every day, she followed the same path. She started in the practice rooms, sweeping floors and dusting surfaces. Each room had its own personality. Some smelled faintly of polish and wood, while others carried the faint scent of sheet music and resin. The pianos in each room were different too. Some were shiny and new, their black and white keys gleaming, while others were older, with scratches on the sides and keys that had yellowed slightly with age. She treated each piano with care, as if they were fragile treasures. After all, she knew they held more than just notes. They held the dreams of everyone who played them. The students rarely noticed her. They were busy with their lessons, their eyes fixed on the sheet music in front of them or the movements of their teacher's hands. Sometimes, if a student bumped into her in a hurry, they would apologize quickly, their voices almost breathless. She would nod politely, never offended, and continue with her work. Over the years, she had learned that being invisible had its advantages. No one expected anything of her, and in that freedom, she could indulge in her own little world, one that was filled with music and imagination. Her love for music was a secret. Not that she had anything to hide, but it wasn't part of her daily life. She had grown up in a small neighborhood where music was a luxury, something that belonged to other people. Her family had struggled, and there were many nights when food and warmth mattered more than piano lessons or fancy instruments. Yet from the moment she first heard the soft notes of a piano drifting from a neighbor's window, she had been captivated. There was something magical about it, the way each note could make a person feel light or heavy, happy or sad. It spoke to her in ways words never could. She had learned to play in secret. The first piano she touched was old and a little out of tune, but she didn't care. She listened carefully to the sounds it made, experimenting with keys, learning which combinations created harmony and which clashed. Over time, she began to recognize patterns, little rules of music that seemed invisible, but were there if one listened closely. She taught herself how to read sheet music, borrowing books when she could, and memorizing every line and note. By the time she was a teenager, she could play melodies that made her heart swell. Even if no one else heard them at the academy, she had found another kind of secret place. There was a practice room at the far end of the hall that was rarely used. It had a grand piano, polished but neglected, sitting in the corner like a forgotten jewel. She discovered it one evening while finishing her work. The students had all gone, and the hall was empty except for her and the soft echo of her footsteps. She hesitated at the door, unsure if she should even enter. But the piano seemed to call to her, a quiet invitation that she could not resist. The first time she played, she was nervous. Her hands trembled as they hovered over the keys. She pressed a key, then another, and slowly the sounds began to fill the room. At first, the notes were hesitant, unsure of themselves, but soon they grew confident, flowing into each other like water over stones. She closed her eyes, letting her fingers move as they wished. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly alive. The music wrapped around her, carrying away the exhaustion and the weight of the day. In that moment, she was not a janitor. She was someone who could create beauty, someone whose heart and soul spoke through her fingertips. Night after night, she returned to that piano. Each evening became a ritual. She would finish her cleaning duties, make sure the halls were empty, and slip into the practice room. She played for hours, sometimes repeating the same piece until she felt it could sing from her hands. Other times, she improvised, letting her emotions guide her through melodies she had never heard before. The walls of the room seemed to embrace her, holding her secret carefully, as if they too understood that this magic was hers alone. Even though no one watched, she imagined an audience. She pictured faces in the hall, their eyes wide with wonder, and she played as if they could hear every note. She imagined a teacher leaning forward, nodding in approval, or a student pausing mid-step, enchanted by the sound. These fantasies were comforting but also motivating. They reminded her that her music mattered, even if it only existed in her mind. She noticed small things over time. The way her fingers moved with greater ease, the way her ear could detect the slightest off-key note, the way she could play with expression that seemed almost human. Music was no longer just a secret hobby. It had become a part of her identity. She began to understand that her talent was rare, even if she could not yet fully define it. She was learning to trust herself, to listen to her instincts, and to let her heart lead her hands. Her routine at the academy continued, a blend of work and secret practice. She would sweep the floors, polish the instruments, and empty trash bins, all while observing the students. She learned from them, noticing how they approached their lessons, how they practiced scales and arpeggios, how they poured emotion into even small exercises. She did not envy them. She admired them. And at night, when she played alone, she felt connected to them in a strange, invisible way. Music was a language they shared, even if they did not know it. Sometimes she faced doubts. There were moments when the weight of her responsibilities felt heavy, when she wondered if she would ever be more than a janitor with a hidden talent. But she pushed those thoughts aside. She knew that music was patient. It waited for those who were willing to listen and to dedicate themselves. Every note she played was a step toward something larger, even if she could not yet see the destination. She also felt a quiet joy in being unnoticed. There was freedom in it. No one demanded perfection. No one judged her mistakes. She could experiment, explore, and grow without pressure. Her music became a sanctuary, a world separate from the routines of daily life. And though she sometimes longed for recognition, she also cherished the intimacy of playing for herself, letting her emotions spill freely into the keys. Her story, though hidden from the world, was building silently. Each day, each evening, each note she played added to a foundation that was slowly becoming unshakable. She was learning discipline, patience, and the power of self-belief. And though she did not know it yet, the world outside the practice room would soon witness a talent that could not remain, hidden forever. By the time the academy's corridors were quiet and the last lights dimmed, she would leave the practice room reluctantly, stretching her tired fingers. She wiped the piano carefully, as if thanking it for sharing its voice with her. Then she would return to her mop and bucket, resuming her role as the janitor. But inside, she carried something far richer than any task could measure or growing. Confidence and a secret gift that could one day change everything. The mornings, the evenings, the secret melodies, and the quiet joy of creation, all of these wove together in her life. Though she appeared ordinary to the casual observer, She was extraordinary in ways no one yet imagined. Her world was small but vibrant, humble but full of promise. And it was here, in the unnoticed corners of the Music Academy, that the first chapter of her story began, softly, secretly, like the first notes of a song waiting to bloom into a symphony. The day began like any other. She entered the academy quietly, her mop and bucket in hand, nodding politely to a few early students who were already practicing. The hall smelled faintly of polish and wood, and the morning light spilled in, casting long shadows on the floor she would soon sweep. She liked these moments, when the academy seemed almost empty and the quiet allowed her to think. She moved through the corridors with care, listening to the distant notes of students warming up, letting the music drift around her like a gentle wind. That morning, she had planned to finish her usual tasks quickly, as there was a student recital scheduled for later. The practice rooms were busier than usual. Teachers moved from one room to another, giving instructions and correcting mistakes. She moved quietly, trying not to disturb anyone, making her way toward the far end of the hall where the grand piano she loved waited. Even in the daylight, it seemed to shine, its polished surface catching the light in a way that made it look almost alive. She paused briefly, wiping her hands on her apron. Her fingers itched to play. She had spent so many evenings at this piano, learning its personality, discovering the way it responded to touch. Each key had its own voice, and she knew it like a friend. She knew the gentle hum it made when pressed, softly, and the full, deep resonance that could fill a room when played with strength. The piano had become her companion in a way no one else could understand. As she approached the room, a sudden voice stopped her. "What are you doing here?" She looked up to see one of the academy's most respected piano instructors standing in the doorway. He was tall, with a sharp gaze that seemed to pierce through people. His presence was commanding, the kind that made students sit up straighter and teachers hesitate. She froze, unsure of what to say. The room had been empty when she walked in, but now she felt exposed, as if she had been caught doing something forbidden. I was just checking the room," she stammered, trying to sound casual. Her voice felt small and unsure, barely audible over the soft echoes in the hall. She hoped he would just nod and walk away, but he did not. His eyes studied her closely, scanning her uniform, the mop and bucket, and finally resting on her hands. "And these?" he asked, gesturing toward her cleaning supplies. "They're for my work," she replied quietly, her heart beating faster. She could feel the tension in her chest, a tightness she had learned to recognize. It was the same feeling she got whenever someone noticed her presence at the piano, the same nervous energy that had kept her fingers trembling the first time she had played in this room alone. He stepped closer, his gaze narrowing. "You shouldn't be here. This is a place for students, for learning, not for janitors." His tone was sharp, almost dismissive. "Stick to sweeping the floors. Leave the piano alone." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had faced judgment before, small dismissals and overlooked efforts, but this felt different. It was public, pointed, and final. She wanted to explain, to tell him that she loved music, that the piano called to her, that she had a connection with. That went beyond cleaning the hall. But the words caught in her throat. They seemed inadequate, foolish even. How could she, a janitor, explain the depths of her passion to someone who measured talent by appearances and certificates? She lowered her head, nodding silently. "Yes, sir," she whispered, her voice barely carrying. She felt the sting of embarrassment and the weight of her secret. A gift she had nurtured in solitude for years, suddenly threatened with exposure and dismissal. She turned away, picking up her mop and bucket, telling herself to focus on the work at hand. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying the scene over and over, her fingers tingling with the memory of the keys she had almost touched Dot as she worked. Sweeping the floors and wiping the piano's surface, she could not shake the words from her mind. Stick to sweeping. They echoed in her head, repeating like a harsh drumbeat. For a moment, she felt small, as if the academy itself had decided her place, limiting her dreams to the corners of empty rooms and quiet evenings. But then, somewhere deep inside, a spark of defiance ignited. She remembered the first time she had pressed a key, the way the sound had vibrated through her body, the way it had made her feel alive. No one could take that away. Not words, not judgment, not even a sharp voice from a respected teacher. She finished her tasks mechanically, moving through the rooms with practiced efficiency. Every sweep of the mop, every dusted shelf, every polished surface was done with precision, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought of the piano, of the melodies she could create, of the hours she had spent alone in that quiet room. And she made a decision. She would not give up her music. She would find a way to play, even if it had to be in secret, even if it had to be hidden from everyone who doubted her. The day passed in a blur of cleaning and observing. She watched the students as they practiced, their fingers moving over the keys with ease, their eyes focused, their bodies swaying slightly with the music. She noticed their small mistakes, the pauses where their confidence faltered, and she silently corrected them in her mind, imagining how she would play differently. It was both humbling and inspiring. She knew that she had much to learn, but she also knew that her instinctive understanding of music was something that could not be taught. It was part of her, woven into the very fabric of who she was. Later, during a short break, she found herself standing outside the practice room again. The hall was quieter now, the sounds of the students playing fading into distant echoes. She rested her hands on the piano lid, feeling the smooth wood beneath her fingers. She could hear the faint hum of the keys, almost as if the piano remembered her touch, welcoming her back even after being scolded. She closed her eyes, letting the memory of her melodies wash over her, the music filling the space between her heart and her hands. She remembered the times she had played late at night, when the academy was empty and the world felt still. She remembered the way the first note of a piece could make her breath catch, the way her fingers danced across the keys as if they had a life of their own. Those memories were more than comfort. They were proof that her music existed, even if no one else could hear it. They were proof that her talent was real, that her passion was valid, that her heart had a voice of its own. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She looked up to see another teacher approaching, someone she had always respected for their gentle nature. They nodded at her, smiling kindly. "Busy morning?" the teacher asked. She nodded in return, careful not to reveal too much of the turmoil she felt inside. She knew that teachers had expectations, that rules were rules, and that stepping out of line could lead to consequences. But she also knew that kindness existed, that not everyone judged by appearances, and that sometimes small moments of encouragement could change everything. The teacher moved on, leaving her alone again. She sighed softly, leaning against the piano. Her hands itched to play, to let the music pour out of her like it always did. But she resisted, reminding herself that the instructor's words still echoed in her mind. Stick to sweeping. It was not just a command. It felt like a boundary, a wall between her and the world she longed to be part of. And yet, she felt a quiet determination building, a resolve that could not be dismissed by words alone. She decided that day that her music would not be constrained by fear or judgment. If she had to, she would play in secret, refining her skills, preparing for a time when she could show the world what she could do. Every note she had ever played, every hour she had spent alone with the piano, was part of a journey that was only just beginning. She understood, more clearly than ever, that talent was not measured by appearances or by job titles, but by dedication, heart, and the courage to follow one's passion. The day ended as it usually did, with her finishing her duties and making sure the academy was spotless. She paused one last time at the piano, brushing her fingers over the keys without pressing them, feeling the potential that lay within. She whispered to herself softly, almost like a promise, "One day they will hear." And with that thought, she gathered her cleaning supplies and left the hall, her steps quiet but purposeful. The words of the instructor still lingered, but they no longer had the power to discourage her. They had awakened something stronger, a determination that could not be silenced, a talent that could not be ignored, and a heart that knew it belonged, not just to cleaning the floors, but to the music that waited patiently for her hands. That evening, long after the students and teachers had gone, she returned to the practice room in secret. The hall was dark, the only light coming from the street lamps outside. She sat at the grand piano, her fingers hovering above the keys, and let herself play. The notes filled the empty room, rich and vibrant, carrying with them the story of a quiet janitor whose heart and soul were entwined with music. Each chord, each melody, each delicate pause was a testament to her resilience, her passion, and the unwavering belief that one day she would not be invisible anymore. In that moment, she was free. She was not a janitor, not an observer, not a shadow in the hallways. She was a musician, a creator, a soul speaking through sound. And though the world outside had yet to recognize her, she knew that she had already claimed her own stage, one note at a time, one evening at. The days that followed felt both long and strangely full of possibility. She continued her duties as a janitor, moving silently through the hallways, emptying trash bins, sweeping floors, and polishing surfaces until they gleamed. Her presence was almost invisible, yet in that invisibility she found freedom. She moved like a shadow among students and teachers, unnoticed but quietly observing. Each note of music that drifted from the practice rooms was a whisper she absorbed, a lesson she learned without speaking a word. Even after the sharp words of the instructor echoed in her mind, she refused to let them break her spirit. "Stick to sweeping," he had said. She had obeyed outwardly, but inside, her determination had only grown. Music was not something that could be limited by a uniform or a job title. She understood that better than anyone else, and she refused to abandon the thing that made her feel alive. That evening, once the last student had left and the academy was hushed, she returned to the grand piano in the far corner. The hall smelled faintly of wax polish and dust, but to her it felt sacred, a place where the rest of the world could not intrude. She lifted the heavy lid of the piano and ran her fingers lightly over the keys, listening to the soft echoes. Each key was familiar, each note a friend she had come to know over countless secret evenings. At first, she played cautiously, testing her fingers on scales and simple melodies. But soon, the music grew bolder. Her hands moved with confidence, flowing over the keys as if they had a memory of their own. She explored pieces she had only ever seen in books, teaching herself with patience and care. Sometimes she repeated the same passage dozens of times, refusing to move on until it sounded just right in her ears. Other times she improvised, letting her emotions dictate the rhythm and melody. The notes carried her sadness, her hope, her dreams, and her secret longing for a world that had yet to notice her. She began to notice subtle changes in her own playing. Her fingers moved faster and more precisely. Her ear became sharper, catching mistakes she had never noticed before. She learned to play with expression, to make the music breathe, to create pauses that added depth and emotion. With each evening, her confidence grew. She felt her talent unfolding, layer by layer, until it seemed almost like a living thing inside her, waiting for the moment it could step into the light. Her secret practice became a ritual. Every night, she would finish her cleaning duties, check the hall to ensure it was empty, and slip into the practice room. The piano responded to her touch as if it recognized her dedication. She knew each note, each subtle resistance of the keys, each tiny imperfection, and she worked with it patiently, shaping the sound until it felt perfect. Hours would pass without her noticing, the music filling the empty space around her, echoing softly in the high ceilings of the academy. Sometimes she imagined an audience. She pictured students stopping mid-step to listen, teachers leaning over the edges of their classrooms in awe. Even the stern instructor who had scolded her watching quietly, his expression shifting from surprise to admiration. These imagined faces encouraged her. They made her play with more passion, with more courage, as if the world outside the practice room could finally see what she had always known, that she belonged here, not just cleaning, but creating. Her evenings were not always easy. There were nights when exhaustion weighed on her, when her muscles ached from the day's work and her fingers trembled from fatigue. There were moments when self-doubt crept in, whispering that she was nothing more than a janitor, that her music could never truly matter. But she refused to listen. She reminded herself of the first time she had pressed a key, of the way the sound had vibrated through her, of the joy and freedom it had given her. She focused on that feeling, letting it guide her hands and steady her heart. Over time, she began to experiment with more complex pieces. She studied the sheet music left behind by students and teachers, memorizing each note, each dynamic marking, each subtle instruction. She taught herself to play pieces that many students had struggled with, practicing until the music became second nature. She learned to combine technical skill with emotion, to let her own feelings guide the performance, and to make every note tell a story. With each passing day, her playing became more sophisticated, more expressive, more alive. There were small victories that filled her with quiet joy. She discovered a chord progression that had once seemed impossible, and her heart leapt when she mastered it. She finally played a difficult passage without hesitation, the notes flowing smoothly under her fingers. She improvised a melody that surprised even herself, discovering something new about her own creativity. These moments reminded her that progress was often invisible to others, but deeply meaningful to the person experiencing it. She also began to notice how her music affected her. It gave her strength for the days ahead, courage to face the stern looks of instructors, patience to endure long hours of work, and comfort in the small victories she achieved in secret. It became a lifeline, a thread connecting her inner world to something larger, something she could not yet fully name. Every time she played, she felt a little closer to herself, a little closer to the person she wanted to become. As the weeks passed, her skill grew in ways she had not imagined possible. Her fingers moved with a confidence and speed that amazed even her, and her ear became finely tuned to subtle variations in tone. She learned to balance power and delicacy, to make loud passages resonate without harshness, to play soft passages with richness and depth. The music began to feel effortless, as if her hands and the piano were one, communicating without words, creating beauty from silence. She began to take risks, trying pieces that were considered advanced, even for students at the academy. She played with daring, experimenting with tempo, dynamics, and phrasing, finding new ways to express emotion. She learned to listen to the music as a living thing, responding to its needs rather than forcing it to follow a strict pattern. Each evening, she pushed herself a little further, learning to trust her instincts, to embrace imperfection, and to find beauty in mistakes that could be shaped into something extraordinary. Her secret practice became more than just a hobby. It was a journey of self-discovery. She realized that her love for music was inseparable from who she was. It gave her a sense of purpose and identity beyond the tasks of her daily work. It reminded her that she was capable of more than others could imagine, that her dreams were valid, and that her talent deserved recognition. Even if it remained hidden for now, she began to notice the little details that made each piano unique. The way the pedals responded to pressure, the slight unevenness of certain keys, the warmth of the wood beneath her hands. She learned to adjust her touch to bring out the best sound, to compensate for imperfections, and to make every note sing. This attention to detail made her playing richer, more nuanced, and more expressive. It also deepened her connection to the instrument, making her feel as though the piano and she were partners in creating something beautiful, even as she practiced. In secret, she remained mindful of her work. She did not let her passion interfere with her responsibilities as a janitor. She swept floors, polished instruments, and cleaned classrooms with care, taking pride in her contribution to the academy. But she also carried the music with her, letting it shape the way she moved, the way she noticed the world around her, and the way she approached each day. Her secret talent became intertwined with her identity, a hidden force that gave her strength and purpose. Occasionally, she thought about what it would be like to be recognized, to play in front of others, to share her music openly. She imagined the reactions of students, teachers, and even the instructor who had scolded her. Would they be surprised? Amazed? Perhaps even ashamed of their assumptions? These thoughts motivated her to continue practicing, to refine her skill, and to prepare for a moment when her talent could no longer remain hidden. She knew that patience was necessary, that timing mattered, and that the right opportunity would come if she remained dedicated as she played each night. She also learned to listen to herself more deeply. She discovered the emotions behind each piece, the stories that the music could tell, and the ways in which her own experiences could shape the performance. She poured her joys and sorrows, her hopes and fears into each note, creating music that was not only technically proficient, but also deeply personal. This connection made her playing unforgettable, even if no one else heard it yet. Her evenings of practice became a sanctuary, a space where she could be entirely herself. The outside world, with its judgments and limitations, could not reach her there. In the quiet of the empty academy, she could explore the full range of her talent, make mistakes without consequence, and push herself to new heights. She felt alive in a way that nothing else could give her. And each night, she left the piano with a sense of fulfillment and anticipation for what was to come. Though her talent remained a secret, it was growing stronger every day. She was no longer just a janitor with a hidden skill. She was a musician in her own right, someone who had nurtured her ability through dedication, patience, and love. And as she cleaned, observed, and practiced, she knew that her moment would come, a day when the world would finally hear the music that had been waiting, quietly. The morning of the recital was filled with a quiet tension. Students hurried through the halls, carrying sheet music and instruments, their faces a mix of excitement and nerves. Teachers moved between rooms, offering last-minute advice and encouragement. The academy buzzed with preparation, a lively energy that made the air feel charged. She moved through it all as usual, her cleaning supplies in hand, watching silently. She was invisible to most, a part of the background, yet today her heart felt restless, as if something was about to change. She followed her routine meticulously. She swept the floors, polished the surfaces, and checked the classrooms to ensure they were ready for the day. Yet her mind kept wandering to the grand piano at the far end of the hall. The instrument called to her in a way that was almost impossible to ignore. She could feel its presence even from a distance, the polished wood gleaming in the morning light, the keys hidden beneath the lid like secrets waiting to be revealed. She wanted desperately to play, but she reminded herself that the recital was for students, not for a janitor. She was still careful, still cautious, but a small spark of... She noticed students practicing nervously, some stumbling over notes, others playing confidently. She saw the instructors correcting mistakes, praising talent, and offering guidance. She felt both admiration and longing. She had seen this routine countless times, and yet today it seemed different. There was an energy in the air, a sense of expectation that made her pulse quicken. She could feel it even in her quiet corner, sweeping floors and tidying spaces, her mind already imagining melodies she might play if given the chance. Late in the afternoon, an unexpected announcement rippled through the academy. One of the students, who was scheduled to perform, had fallen ill and would not be able to take the stage. The recital would continue, but there was a gap in the program, a piano piece left unplayed. The teachers discussed it quietly, trying to decide who could step in at the last minute. She overheard bits of the conversation, her heart beginning to race. Could she? Should she? She kept sweeping, her hands steady, even though her mind was spinning with possibility. The room assigned for the performance was prepared. Chairs were lined up for the audience, a small stage cleared of obstacles, and the grand piano waiting, polished and ready. She stayed in the background, continuing her work, pretending not to notice the flurry of activity. But every movement felt heavier, every sweep of the mop slower, because she could feel the moment approaching. It was as if the academy itself was holding its breath, waiting for something extraordinary to happen, though no one knew what or who it would be. Finally, one of the teachers approached her. She froze, unsure of what was coming. The teacher's eyes held a mix of hesitation and curiosity. "There's a gap in the program," the teacher said softly, glancing around as if making sure no one overheard. "Would you play the piano? Just this once? The audience is waiting, and we need someone who can perform." Her heart leapt, her mind raced. She had practiced in secret for years, imagining this exact moment. Yet now that it had arrived, doubt crept in. She thought of the stern instructor who had told her to stick to sweeping. She thought of the audience, students and teachers expecting someone extraordinary, not a janitor. Her hands shook slightly, but she took a deep breath and nodded. I can," she whispered, her voice trembling but determined. The teacher smiled, relief and encouragement mingling in their expression. "Thank you," they said quietly. "I believe you can do this." And with that, they stepped aside. Leaving her alone with the piano dot, she approached the instrument cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The hall was quiet, the audience settling into their seats, their faces curious and expectant. She lifted the lid slowly, as if revealing a treasure. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, feeling the smooth wood, the coolness of the ivory. Then she pressed the first note, softly, almost tentatively. The sound filled the hall, delicate but confident, catching the attention of everyone present. As she continued, her confidence grew. The melody flowed from her hands effortlessly, each note resonating with emotion. She played pieces she had mastered in secret, combining technical skill with heartfelt expression. She allowed herself to improvise, letting her feelings guide the music. The audience was silent, captivated by the unexpected talent that was unfolding before them. They had expected a student, perhaps a last-minute substitution, but what they heard was something extraordinary, something that transcended the usual performances. She played with everything she had. Every chord carried her years of secret practice. Every arpeggio echoed her passion. Every pause conveyed her anticipation, her longing, and her courage. The music was no longer just a sequence of notes. It was a story, a journey, a reflection of her life and dreams. She could feel the hall vibrating with the sound, the energy of the audience feeding back into her performance, lifting her even higher, The stern instructor who had scolded her appeared at the side of the hall, his expression frozen in disbelief. He had come to watch the recital, unaware that the janitor he had dismissed was about to perform. As her fingers moved across the keys, he realized the depth of her talent, the precision of her technique, and the emotion in every note. His eyes widened, and for the first time, he felt a pang of regret for having judged her so harshly. He had assumed that her role as a janitor defined her abilities, and now he was confronted with a truth he could not ignore. She was extraordinary. The audience remained silent, held captive by the music. Some students leaned forward, their mouths slightly open in awe. Teachers exchanged glances, whispering softly to each other, unsure of what to say. Even the staff, who had always seen her as invisible, watched with wide eyes, astonished by the transformation before them. Every note she played was a revelation, every chord a declaration that talent cannot be confined by appearances or expectations. As she moved into the final section of the piece, her hands seemed to move of their own, a chord guided by years of practice and passion. She played with abandon, allowing herself to fully express the music that had been hidden for so long. The notes soared, filling every corner of the hall, touching hearts in ways that words never could. She felt herself becoming part of the music, and the music becoming part of her. It was a moment of pure connection, a rare and beautiful harmony between the performer, the instrument, and the listener's. When the last note finally faded, a profound silence hung in the hall. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the world itself had paused, acknowledging the beauty that had just been shared. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the room, growing louder with each passing second. Students, teachers, and staff rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, some with tears in their eyes. The sound was overwhelming, a mixture of admiration, surprise, and joy. She sat at the piano, breathless, her hands still resting on the keys. Her heart pounded, and her mind struggled to comprehend what had just happened. The applause continued, a wave of recognition and approval that she had never experienced before. She looked out at the audience, seeing faces filled with wonder and amazement. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not as a janitor, but as a musician, a person capable of creating beauty that could touch others deeply. The stern instructor approached her, his expression a mix of humility and admiration. He stopped in front of her, unable to find words at first. Finally he spoke, his voice low and sincere. I underestimated you," he admitted. "I was wrong. Your talent, it's remarkable." She looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, and felt a quiet sense of vindication, not from pride, but from the acknowledgement of her years of dedication and love for music. She nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice still shaking. Slightly. It was not just a response to his words, but a recognition of everything she had achieved in secret, the countless hours of practice, the patience, the determination, and the unwavering belief in herself. The recital continued, but the moment she had created lingered in the air. People would talk about it for weeks, perhaps months. They would remember the janitor who had played a piano piece with such skill and emotion that it left everyone in awe. For her, the experience was transformative. It was proof that talent could not be hidden forever, that passion and dedication could break through any barrier, and that courage could turn a simple opportunity into a life-changing moment. As she left the stage that day, her hands still tingling from the music, she realized something important. The world could no longer define her by her job or her appearance. She had stepped into the light, and she had claimed her place as a musician. The piano had been her secret companion for years, and now it had carried her into a new reality, one where her talent was recognized and celebrated. That night, long after the applause had faded and the academy was quiet once more, she returned to the practice room. The piano awaited her, familiar and comforting, its keys glistening under the soft light. She sat down and played, not for an audience this time, but for herself. The music was freer, more joyful, and more personal than ever. She felt a sense of completeness, a sense of belonging that had been messy. The day after the recital, the academy felt different. The corridors that had always seemed ordinary now held a quiet sense of excitement. Students whispered to each other in hushed tones, glancing toward her as they passed. Teachers exchanged knowing smiles, sometimes stopping to discuss what had happened during the performance. Even staff who had seen her as invisible before now looked at her with curiosity and newfound respect. She moved through it all carefully, sweeping floors and polishing surfaces, yet she could feel the energy around her. The world she had known for years had subtly shifted overnight. Her hands still tingled from the night before. The music she had played in front of the audience seemed to linger inside her, resonating in her chest and mind. She remembered every chord, every phrase, every subtle pause. It was as if the recital had unlocked something deep within her, something she had only felt in secret for years. She had stepped into a new reality, one where her talent was no longer hidden, where her music could be recognized and appreciated. The students were the first to approach her. A few of them, those who had been closest to the piano, stopped her. In the hall, their eyes wide with excitement. "That was incredible yesterday," one whispered, almost afraid to speak too loudly. "We didn't know you could play like that." She smiled softly, her heart warming at their words. She had always loved observing the students, admiring their skill and dedication, and now they were seeing her in a new light. Their recognition felt honest, simple, and meaningful. Even the teachers were talking about her performance. One approached her quietly while she polished the piano in the main hall. "You were amazing," the teacher said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening too closely. "We never expected. Well, we never imagined someone could play like that without training. It's remarkable." She felt a surge of gratitude, but also a touch of embarrassment. She had played in secret for so long, never seeking attention or recognition. Now, hearing praise felt unfamiliar, almost surreal. Her routine continued, but nothing felt the same. Each time she entered a room, she noticed the subtle changes, the way students glanced at her with curiosity, the way teachers paused briefly to nod in acknowledgement. She was no longer invisible. Her presence had a new weight, a quiet authority that came not from her role as a janitor, but from the skill and passion she had demonstrated. She moved through the halls with care, aware of the eyes upon her, yet determined to remain grounded, to keep her feet on the floor and her heart focused on music. The stern instructor who had scolded her approached her later that day. She stiffened as she saw him coming, expecting a lecture, perhaps even a reminder of her place in the academy. Instead, he stopped in front of her and studied her face with an intensity she had never seen before. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly, almost hesitantly. "I judged you unfairly. I should never have dismissed your talent. What you did yesterday, it was extraordinary. I don't know if I can fully explain how impressed I am." She looked at him, surprised but calm. She nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of relief and quiet satisfaction. "Thank you," she said softly. It wasn't pride that she felt, but a sense of acknowledgement that years of dedication, practice, and patience had finally been recognized. She realized that talent and hard work could not remain hidden forever, and that sometimes the right moment would arrive, even unexpectedly. The academy began to change in subtle ways. Students who had once barely noticed her now offered polite greetings, some even asking her about music and practice. Teachers began to involve her in discussions about the pianos, maintenance, and even technique, treating her as someone who had valuable insight rather than just a staff member performing routine duties. The small, invisible world she had occupied for so long was expanding, filled with new possibilities and opportunities she had never imagined. Her evenings continued to be spent at the piano, but now with a different feeling. Before, she had played in secret, her music a private escape. Now, after the recital, she played with a sense of purpose and anticipation, wondering what new doors might open. She experimented with more challenging pieces, improvising with greater freedom, exploring dynamics and expressions she had only imagined before. The piano responded to her touch as if it, too, recognized the shift, the way her music had moved from private practice to public acknowledgement. There were moments of quiet reflection as well. She thought about the years she had spent practicing alone, the nights she had felt invisible, the moments when doubt had threatened to overwhelm her. And yet, she realized that every one of those moments had been necessary, shaping her into the musician she had become. Each obstacle, each discouraging word, had strengthened her resolve and deepened her understanding of herself and her art. She had grown in ways that were invisible to the world, yet crucial to the moment she now occupied. Opportunities began to present themselves, small at first, but significant in their potential. A teacher suggested she accompany a student during practice, noting that her skill and sensitivity could be invaluable. Another offered to let her demonstrate a technique during a class, allowing students to learn from her. She approached each opportunity with humility and focus, understanding that these moments were not just about recognition, but about sharing the music she loved, about contributing to the community that had once overlooked her. She also began to receive invitations to participate in informal recitals and student gatherings. These were not grand performances, but they were important stepping stones. She played pieces she had perfected in secret, feeling the thrill of being listened to, of having her music appreciated by others. The reactions were always positive, filled with wonder and gratitude. She realized that the act of playing for others, of sharing her passion, brought a joy that private practice alone could not provide. Her relationship with the stern instructor evolved as well. Though he had been harsh and dismissive before, he now approached her with a sense of respect and even mentorship. He offered advice on technique, suggested pieces for her to explore, and encouraged her to consider formal opportunities to study and perform. She accepted his guidance cautiously, aware of his past judgment, but also recognizing the value of learning from someone so experienced. Their interactions became a mix of mentorship, mutual respect, and cautious friendship, a dynamic that had been impossible before her performance. The students continued to be a source of inspiration and connection. Some approached her with questions about piano techniques, scales, or specific pieces they had heard her play. Others sought her advice on expression and emotion, curious about how she could convey such depth of feeling without formal training. She shared her knowledge generously, mindful of the fact that talent was not only about ability, but also about patience, practice, and the courage to trust oneself. In helping others, she discovered a new layer of fulfillment, a sense of purpose that extended beyond her own music. The academy itself seemed to embrace her more openly. Teachers who had once ignored her contributions now invited her input, valuing her perspective. Students began to see her as a role model, a living example of perseverance and dedication. Her presence, once invisible, now had weight and meaning. She moved through the halls with a quiet confidence, grounded in the knowledge that her talent had been recognized, and that her efforts had not been in vain. Yet, she remained humble. She knew that recognition was not the ultimate goal. Music was her passion, her way of expressing herself and connecting with the world. She continued to practice diligently, refining her skill, exploring new pieces, and experimenting with improvisation. Each evening at the piano was an opportunity to grow, to discover new depths of expression, and to nurture the talent that had carried her through years of invisibility and doubt. There were moments of reflection and gratitude as well. She thought about the years she had spent in quiet practice, the evenings when no one listened, the nights when her talent was hidden and her efforts unnoticed. Those years had shaped her, teaching her patience, resilience, and the power of persistence. She realized that the journey itself, with its struggles and solitude, had been essential in creating the musician she had become. Recognition was gratifying, but the true value lay in the dedication, the love for music, and the courage to continue despite obstacles. As weeks passed, she began to think more boldly about her future. The academy had become a place of opportunity, a space where she could grow not only as a musician, but also as a person. She began to consider formal training, exploring the possibility of lessons or mentorship that could further develop her talent. The idea was both exciting and intimidating, a step into a world she had long admired from a distance, but never dared to enter. Yet she felt ready, strengthened by the validation of her peers and the experience of performing in front of an audience. Her life at the academy had shifted in ways she could not have imagined. The invisible janitor who had once moved quietly through the halls was now recognized for her extraordinary talent. She had transformed her secret passion into something tangible, something that touched the lives of others and reshaped their perceptions. Her story became one of inspiration, proof that perseverance, dedication, and courage could break through barriers, even when the odds ceased. The weeks that followed her performance were unlike anything she had ever experienced. The academy seemed to have transformed overnight, and with it, her own place in the world. Students who had once barely noticed her now greeted her warmly, asking about her practice, her favorite pieces, and the music she loved. Teachers began to involve her in decisions about recitals, performances, and even the selection of new instruments for the academy. The janitor who had moved quietly through the hallways had become someone people sought out for guidance and inspiration, and she carried this new attention with quiet grace. Despite the sudden recognition, she remained grounded. She knew that the applause and praise she had received were not the goal. They were simply acknowledgement of something that had existed long before anyone else saw it. Her music had always been her passion, her escape, her companion. Now it was also a bridge, connecting her to others in ways she had never imagined. She felt a profound responsibility to nurture that connection, to use her talent not only for herself, but to inspire those around her. The stern instructor who had once dismissed her now approached her with a different demeanor. He offered constructive advice, suggested advanced pieces, and even proposed opportunities for her to perform at external events. He was no longer a figure of judgment, but a mentor who recognized her extraordinary ability. She listened carefully, grateful for his support, yet she also trusted her own instincts. She had learned to balance guidance with her own voice, understanding that true mastery came from both discipline and personal expression. Her evenings continued to be spent at the piano, but the sessions had changed. No longer did she play only in secret. She experimented with new techniques, explored improvisation, and sometimes allowed small groups of students or teachers to listen quietly. The music became richer, more confident, and more expressive. She discovered subtleties she had never noticed before, nuances in timing and phrasing, and the power of silence between notes. Each performance, whether private or in front of a small audience, was a lesson in understanding the depth and emotion that music could convey. One afternoon, a student approached her hesitantly. Would you teach me?" The student asked. Her eyes widened slightly, and a small smile spread across her face. Teaching had never been her goal, Yet she realized that sharing her knowledge was a natural extension of her journey. She agreed, guiding the student with patience, demonstrating techniques and encouraging them to express themselves fully. Watching the student's growth reminded her of her own path, the years of quiet practice, the moments of doubt, and the thrill of discovery. She understood that teaching was not just about instruction. It was about nurturing confidence, patience, and passion. Word of her talent began to spread beyond the academy. Invitations arrived for informal performances, community events, and small recitals. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to share her music with a wider audience. But each opportunity brought with it the possibility to grow, to learn, and to inspire. She accepted cautiously, knowing that every note she played carried the weight of her journey, the hours of practice, and the courage it had taken to step into the light. Her first external performance was held at a local community center. She entered the room nervously, her hands slightly trembling, but the piano was familiar, and the music felt like home. As she began to play, the nervousness melted away, replaced by a sense of connection and purpose. The audience listened in rapt attention, their expressions shifting from curiosity to awe as they realized the depth and emotion in every note. The applause at the end was thunderous, heartfelt, and sincere. She felt a mixture of joy and humility, recognizing that her music had touched others in ways she had always hoped for but never dared to expect. Back at the academy, her reputation as both a talented musician and a mentor continued to grow. Students sought her guidance, teachers respected her insights, and the staff looked at her with admiration. She had moved from being an invisible janitor to someone whose presence and talent were celebrated. Yet she never let the recognition change who she was. She continued her cleaning duties with care, understanding that her humility and integrity were as important as her skill at the piano. She had learned that true success was measured not only by talent, but by character, kindness, and the willingness to lift others along the way. She also began to explore her own compositions. Using the techniques she had mastered and the lessons she had learned from observation, she started creating original pieces. These compositions were deeply personal, reflecting her journey, her struggles, her triumphs, and her dreams. She shared them with a few trusted students and teachers who were amazed at the emotional depth and technical skill of the music. Composing brought a new layer of fulfillment, allowing her to express feelings that words could never capture. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It had become a voice for her soul. As her confidence grew, she began to participate in larger events, sometimes playing alongside students or even other instructors. Each performance was a new challenge, a chance to refine her technique, to explore expression, and to connect with her audience. She discovered the thrill of collaboration, learning to listen and respond to others in real time, creating music that was dynamic and alive. These experiences reinforced her belief that music was not just about skill, but about empathy, communication, and the shared human experience. Her journey was not without challenges. There were moments of self-doubt, nights when her fingers ached, and times when she worried about balancing her responsibilities with her growing opportunities. Yet she faced these challenges with the same determination and patience that had guided her through years of secret practice. She learned to listen to her body, to take breaks when needed, and to approach her craft with both discipline and care. The struggles were a reminder that growth, even for someone as talented as she had become, required resilience and persistence. The Academy community began to celebrate her not just as a musician, but as an example of perseverance and courage. Students looked up to her, inspired by her journey from the quiet janitor who cleaned floors to the talented performer who could move hearts with music. Teachers spoke of her dedication, using her story to encourage students to believe in themselves and to pursue their passions, no matter how impossible they might seem. Her life had become a testament to the power of quiet dedication, resilience, and the courage to step beyond limitations. She herself was changed, not only by the recognition and opportunities, but by the journey she had undertaken. She had learned the value of patience, the importance of humility, and the transformative power of perseverance. She had discovered that talent alone was not enough. It required practice, passion, courage, and the willingness to embrace both success and failure. Most importantly, she had learned that her identity was not defined by her role in society, but by the depth of her commitment and the love she had for her art. Over time, she became more involved in the Academy's programs, mentoring students, helping to organize recitals, and sharing her insights on performance and expression. Her experience as someone who had learned in secret allowed her to empathize with students who struggled, who doubted themselves, or who felt unseen. She guided them patiently, offering encouragement, demonstrating techniques, and showing that true talent could flourish when nurtured with dedication and heart. She also continued to perform, both within the Academy and beyond. Each performance was a celebration of her journey, a moment to share her music with the world, and a chance to inspire others. Her repertoire grew, including both classical pieces and her own compositions. She played with confidence, passion, and emotional depth, connecting with her audience in ways that went far beyond technical skill. Music had become her language, a means to communicate what words could not, and she used it to touch lives, move hearts, and create beauty in the world. As months turned into years, she became an integral part of the Academy's community. She was respected not just for her musical talent, but for her humility, kindness, and dedication. She had transformed from the janitor who had been told to stick to sweeping into a symbol of inspiration, proof that talent, patience, and courage could overcome even the most unlikely obstacles. Her story encouraged others to believe in themselves, to pursue their passions, and to never underestimate the power of quiet determination. One evening, as she sat at the grand piano, playing a piece she had composed herself, she reflected on her journey. She thought about the years of secret practice, the moments of doubt, the harsh words she had once received, and the triumph of finally being seen. Each note she played carried the memory of that journey, the struggles and victories, the hope and courage that had guided her. She understood that her music was more than just sound. It was a reflection of her life, her growth, and her soul. In that quiet moment, she realized that the journey was not over. There would always be new pieces to master, new challenges to face, and new opportunities to share her music. But she also knew that she had already accomplished something extraordinary. She had claimed her place in the world, not through recognition alone, but through dedication, passion, and the unwavering belief in herself. She had proven that tall,